Welcome to Sober Talk. I'm Dennis and I have lived experience of alcohol. If you or anyone you know is struggling with alcohol, please call Alcoholics Anonymous on 1300 222222 or check out their website on aa.org.au. I'll just run through the preamble of Alcoholics Anonymous. Alcoholics Anonymous is a fellowship of men and women who share their experience, strength and hope with each other. They must solve their common problems and help others to recover from alcoholism. The only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking. There are no dues or fees for AA membership. We are self-supporting through our own contributions. AA is not allied with any sect, denomination, politics, organisation or institution, does not wish to engage in any controversy, neither endorses or opposes any causes. Our primary purpose is to stay sober and help other alcoholics achieve sobriety.
Hi, my name's Bluey. I'm an alcoholic. Tell a bit of my story. Came into AA at the age of 31. And been around for a few years now. I'm 72, so it's a few years in AA. But yeah, I'll tell what it was like when I was drinking. At the age of 13, I picked up my first drink. It was at my sister's birthday party. I didn't know it was alcohol. It was a cocktail mix. I thought it was orange juice, but I was always a very quiet person. And all of a sudden I started drinking this cocktail and a different person came out of me, different character, and I started to talk to people. I started to talk to the women and started to ask for dancing. I started dancing and telling them jokes. And then I ended up in a fight a little bit later, my future brother-in-law, and I ran away from home. So I really should have realised alcohol is not for me from that time on, but it wasn't to be. I came back home after about an hour and went to bed, and then I woke up the next day and nobody really said anything to me about it, so I just carried on with life. But I noticed my life did change. I used to go to church and be a bit of I was in the Scouts and that, and I started to give all those things away, and I started to hang around with people that did drink. My family weren't drinkers. They were only social drinkers. Never seen them get drunk, and I've never seen my 3 sisters get drunk. But I ended up being an alcoholic. I know today it's in the genes, in the family, going back through the ancestry. It's on both sides. I've got Irish and Welsh. And there's certainly alcoholics in both sides. So I found that out since I've been in AA. But I didn't know it then. And I carried on hanging around with my friend down the road called Freddie. His family drank pretty heavy, and so did his neighbours. And there was always a few arguments and fights going on. Police were called in, and I thought this is pretty exciting, And I just drank soft drinks while I was there. I never drank alcohol because of the fear of what happened the first time. But eventually, after 2.5 years, I put my age up to get my motorbike licence, and I had a little motorbike. And one Saturday morning, a guy called Freddie asked me whether he'd take me down to the Cross Keys Hotel. I lived at Kilburn at the time. That's where I was raised. I said, no worries, mate, jump on the back, and it was pouring with rain. We got to the Cross Keys Hotel, and we were both bloody drowned, and went in the front bar, and there was nobody there except the barman. I went into your head, and next thing I turn around, there's a pint of beer sitting there, and I said, Fred, I can't drink, I'm underage. It was 21-year-old legal drinking in those days. And he said, don't worry, have it. There's only the barman here, and he wouldn't have served it. He didn't want us to drink it. So we drank him. And I had another couple, I think, and then Freddie asked me whether I'd take him around to see this guy he had an argument with the night before. He wanted to sort him out. and being a people pleaser like I was, I just said, yeah, no worries, mate, we'll go around there. And we went around there, but there was no fight or nothing. We just sat down and talked and got drunk together, the three of us, and that was the beginning of back on the drink. And that's how cunning and baffling and powerful this disease is, I was no thought of picking an alcoholic drink up till that day. And, didn't drink for 2.5 years after when I was 13. But there it was sitting in front of me, and drink it, and away I went, just picked it up again as if I drank it yesterday. And yeah, I didn't get in a lot of trouble to start with, but eventually I was getting into trouble with the law, hanging around with an environment, people that, broke into places and that, and stealing stuff. I never did it, but I was part of the driver of the car at times, because I always had a car. And, eventually ended up in courts and receiving stolen goods because they were in my car. And 15.5, we got a 2-year bond. And I got through that, and by the time I was 18, things were getting worse, and I ended up assaulting a police officer at the age of 18, and I graduated to jail then, so it was a little bit different going to jail than going to boys' homes, I found out. A little bit harder in those places. It was the Adelaide jail where I ended up doing 21 days with that assault charge. And I come out of there, it didn't really change me. As soon as I walked out of that jail, I walked straight across to the pub, which is not far from where the jail was, and the money I'd earned in there, I just spent straight away at the bar. And, I didn't get drunk, but I spent what I had. So that I didn't drink while I was in there because we couldn't get it, but it was in my mind as soon as I left there to go straight to the pub, and that's where I went. And I ended up having to walk nearly 6 miles home to Kilburn because I didn't have no money left. But eventually I didn't get home. I got to the Blair Alpha Hotel and met a few friends there, and they gave me some money. So I didn't really get home till very late that night, early in the morning. And my parents weren't very happy, So I used to come home most of the time and just go to bed, but occasionally I'd have this build-up of pressure inside of me, and I'd come home and my poor parents used to have to put up with the stupidity I used to, carry on, and upset my parents and upset the neighbours if they started saying a few things or anything. So it was pretty crazy life. By the time I was 19, I thought I better get out of South Australia. The police are getting to know me too well. I didn't really want to go back to jail. And I jumped on my motorbike and started travelling up to the East Coast. I thought, I'd start a new life, get away from down here and try it fresh up there, get another job and maybe get another girlfriend and, work hard and save money and have a good life, and that's what I wanted to do, but every time I tried that, I took me with me. The problem was still there. I never done nothing about it. And it always got worse, and I started to hang around in bike clubs in the eastern states, and I didn't join any, but I like being around them because I've always ridden motorbikes, and I enjoyed the bike riding part of it, but I didn't really enjoy all the other stuff that went on. And I had to be pretty well drinking to be around that sort of atmosphere because I never grew up with that sort of atmosphere around me, I grew up in a quiet family. But bike clubs are a little bit different. Some of them don't even need a drink to do stupid things. They're pretty crazy without it, And I needed to drink to be around them, otherwise I was shaking mess. And by the time I was 18, I remember one of my mates come around my place and I was cleaning my motorbike, and he said, "Your hands are a bit shaky, Bluey." And I said, "Yeah, I reckon that's that bloody pie I ate at the Speedway last night." And and I just laughed. He just laughed. He said, "I know what you need. It's the hair of the dog." And I said, "What's that?" He said, "You got a couple bottles of beer in the fridge?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Go and grab one of them, and we'll have a bottle of beer. See how you feel after that." And that was the beginning of picking up a drink in the mornings to get rid of the shakes. And sometimes it worked, and sometimes it didn't work. It didn't get rid of the shakes. It got worse over the years. But three or four DUI charges travelling around Australia, but I still rode my motorbike from one state to the next. Every time I got a fine, I left the fine. I said, "Yeah, I'll pay it." They give you time to pay it. And as soon as I got out of the court, I'd get my pay where I was working and jump on my motorbike and tick off again, and go to another state. And the same thing would repeat itself all the time, Had the same idea to settle down and nice girlfriend, maybe get married one day and have kids. And, the old home sweet home sign. It's always on my mind. That's what I wanted in life, but it never happened. Just every time I picked up a drink, it took those things away from me. Good jobs, good women, and it was just getting worse and worse. Eventually, I got away from the bike clubs and went up to the Darwin, and sort of running away from it was because I got beat up pretty bad one night, and I thought, well, these are my friends. I'm not going to hang around with them anymore. And I took off to Darwin and met one of my mates up there. And he gave me a job in the pub. And for an alcoholic, I think that's the worst thing that could happen, because alcohol's around you 24 hours a day. And I was getting fairly drunk and doing my job all the time. And eventually the manager was starting to chat me and he said, "You're drinking too much, Bluey, you can't come in like this and go to work." And I said, "Yeah, okay, yeah." And they gave me a job working on the door at night when we had dances, the disco dances and that. And as a bouncer, well, I'm not a real big fella, so I used to try to talk people down, try to quieten them down more so than grabbing them or anything. And eventually one night, I was helping my mate out. He went outside, quieting the crowd down. And he didn't come back in for a while, so I said to my boss, "I better go out there and see what's going on." When I went out there, my mate was up against the wall. He'd been stabbed 3 times in the back, and I grabbed the guy that was doing it, and he spun around and he stabbed me with a knife too, and that really scared me, He cut my arm pretty bad. He cut my nerve, the blood was pouring out. I couldn't use it. And I just took off running down the bloody road with this guy chasing me, and I reckon I ran the fastest I've ever ran in my life. And I ended up hiding behind a bush, the back of the nightclub, and trying not to breathe, because your heart's pounding. You think they're going to hear you, And next thing I got a tap on the shoulder, and it happened to be the manager. It scared the hell out of me. I just about had a heart attack. And he said, "You better come inside now, Bluey. The guys have gone, and you and your mate better get to hospital. The ambulance is coming." So that's what we did. But after that, I sort of became a bit of a loner drinking. Didn't trust people very much after that. We didn't get no treatment in those days for trauma, accidents or like that. It was just sew you up and kick you out the hospital, and that's what they did. So I got another DUI charge in Darwin, and then I ended up taking off from that one and coming back to trying to get back to Adelaide on my motorbike. And I got as far as Tennant Creek, and I actually got caught by Sergeant Police going through Tennant Creek, and he put me in the jail there, and I didn't know what was going to happen. And they checked around Australia. They didn't have computers in those days. They had to do it all by phone, but they ended up checking up, and they found out I had $1,300 in warrants all around Australia I hadn't paid. Plus, I was riding my motorbike without, under suspension orders, so I didn't know what was going to happen. I was in this little chicken pen in Tennant Creek, the little jail out the back, and this guy come over. He said, looking through the wire there, and he said, "Is that you, Bluey?" And I looked at him, "Oh shit, that's Bill." I rode down the west coast with him a couple of years before from Darwin, and he remembered me, and he said, "What are you doing in there?" And I told him the story. Said, "Oh, we can fix that up for you, Bluey. No worries, we'll get some money." And they borrowed the money off the bank manager and got me out of there. And I got a job and was paying him back over the weeks everywhere I got paid. I put money back to them. But the two guys that helped me, they ended up robbing the bank. So they ended up in jail in there. And I ended up getting out of Tanner Creek about 2 o'clock in the morning. So that we couldn't get caught riding my motorbike. And just as I was leaving the caravan park, who happened to come in was the sergeant that caught me. And he just looked at me and shook his head. And I just jumped on my motorbike and headed back to Darwin. Yeah, so it's a crime. The girl I had at that time, she tried to commit suicide. I come home one day and found blood in the caravan running out through the door, and she was lying there, bleeding, and I'm thought, what the hell? I had to take her up to hospital. All these things were happening more and more, It wasn't a very happy life I was having, and it was what I created. I can't blame anybody else today. I knew I come to terms with it when I got to AA. Eventually, I got back to Adelaide and had a few operations, and I met a young lady with a couple of kids, and I ended up marrying that lady. And she was calling me an alcoholic within 12 months. And I said, I've got to do something about this. I get her off me back. I'll call AA and go to a meeting. Didn't know much about AA. So I walked into it pretty blind. My wife made sure I got there. And I sat in that meeting. There's about a dozen people there. They used to smoke in the rooms in those days. I'm not a smoker. But I sat there with my eyes closed and I listened to people share their stories, and I got an identification from that very first meeting. Every person I spoke that night told a part of me, the things they had done or done similar things. And they thought, well, maybe I do have a problem, with alcohol. I didn't admit it that night, but I left that meeting and something happened the next morning because I didn't pick a drink up. That's the first time that had happened to me for a lot of years. And I got to another meeting and I'd done that for 9 weeks, but I didn't save the marriage. The wife had already planned to leave, and I didn't know how to handle those feelings emotionally, being sober. I always drank through things like that. And eventually I picked up a drink, and with that one drink, that first drink done the damage. And I heard it in the room said many times, that's that first drink, Bluey, that does the damage, not the fourth or the fifth or the sixth. And I used to think, it's how much you drink that does the damage, but it's not. It's the first drink sets off a compulsion in my mind to want to have another and another, because I'm an alcoholic. It's the most natural thing for me to do. It calms my head down. So, that's what I did, and came home and I upset the wife and kids, and this is like Christmas Eve 1983, so it wasn't a very good Christmas, and she got up and left, and I was there by myself in there. I didn't know what was going to happen, whether I had a roof over my head the next day or whatever, but I had a lot of thinking, and I sat on the back doorstep thinking about what's going to happen to my life and where I'm going to be, and strange thing happened. The AA things I'd heard in these rooms in that 9 weeks started to come back to me. And I remember an older member saying to me, maybe you've got the disease, alcoholism, Bluey. It's a disease, mate, And I was in denial of having a disease. Disease to me is like a cancer, leprosy, or some other medical disease. I couldn't understand them saying alcoholism is a fatal disease, and today I understand that, and I believe that day I accepted I suffer from a disease called alcoholism. And once I did that, I believe the compulsion left me, to want to have another drink. I haven't need to pick another drink up since that day. And I got back to AA. I only drank for that one day, thank the Lord. And I asked God for help that day, and I believe He gave it to me. And not that I'm a religious person, I believe in a God today of my understanding. Then He helps me get through whatever happens in my life. And it's we keep it fairly simple today. We've got a 12-step program we go through in AA, and I did that over time. That helped me get rid of a lot of rubbish I was hanging on to for a lot of years, from childhood right up through my adult life. I had to learn how to live again. I had to learn how to grow and to be out there in the community. And the wife left, and I ended up with a couple of kids to look after. And that was good. The best thing I think could have happened for me. I didn't think so at the time, of course. I thought it was the worst thing in the world, being up with a couple of kids and a lot of bills and debts. But I know today it was the best thing that could have happened, because I knew I had to be a responsible person at last. I couldn't keep running away from things anymore. So I took the two boys on, two young boys then. They were 7 and 9. They're adults these days and got their own families, and life today is pretty good. I end up remarried again, and a couple more kids from that marriage. I have a daughter that suffers from the same disease. She's in the Northern Territory. She's still suffering from it, unfortunately, still drinking and drugging. But I pray for her. I've tried to help her. Like, all I can do now is just pray, and when she's ready, she'll find the help she needs. So life today is pretty good, though. I retired today. I had a job for 30 years, and I couldn't stick a job out for 12 months when I was drinking. The big turnaround when you get sober. And you got to put the footwork in, of course. And life is getting better one day at a time. You still have your ups and downs, but I don't need to pick a drink up to cope. And that's what makes things a lot better, Yeah, so not much more I can say. I think it's getting about the time. So I'll end there, and I hope someone can get some help from what I've just said. Maybe the day at a time to pick up their first drink and keep coming back to meetings. And I'll leave it there. Thanks very much.
Good on you, Bluey. Thanks a lot for doing that.
We have local meetings for the full week in the local area. Monday is Gala meeting at 8 o'clock. Tuesday is Elizabeth East at 8 o'clock. Wednesday is Elizabeth East at 8 o'clock. Thursday is Two Wells at 8 o'clock. And Friday is Salisbury at 8 o'clock. There's a meeting at Davron Park at 12 o'clock. And on Sunday there's a meeting in Salisbury at 7 o'clock. And many other meetings in the area. For details of your local meetings, please phone 1300 22 22 22. And once again, if anyone you know is struggling with alcohol issues, please call Alcoholics Anonymous on 1300 22 22 22. The website is aaSouthAustralia.org.au.